my hand. So okay, thank God. Please be seated. May the grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all this morning. This morning we're going to look at a passage in Exodus chapter 18. Let us turn to Exodus chapter 18. Exodus chapter 18, verse 1. And Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Verse 2. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back. 3. With her 2 sons, of whom the name of whom one was Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. 4. And the name of the other was Eleazar, who he said, the God of my father was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Verse 5. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. 6. Now he had said to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Let's jump down to verse 8. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptian for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. 9. Then Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. Verse 10. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Let's stop right there. So we can see here that there is a character named Jethro, and he is the father-in-law of Moses. On Sunday, we talked a little bit about Moses and his first phase, in which he felt very emboldened to save the people of God. But then he had another thing coming, right? That in his second phase in his life, he was sent out to this land, this unknown land to him, Midian. And in this wilderness, he learned the skillful craft of what it is like to be a shepherd. And so, of course, he meets his future father-in-law and his future wife. So here we can see that, first of all, we can see that between Jethro and Moses, there was a very good relationship. First of all, Jethro we'll assume that he is somewhat older than Moses, right? Obviously, we can see that is the father of his wife. And we see here that Jethro comes to bid some greetings to Moses. And this is discussing all of the news that he heard that the people had been delivered out of Egypt and also on the way to the promised land. So for this, Jethro is very thankful. So Jethro has a very kind and caring concern toward his son-in-law. So I think the first thing we can kind of gather from here is, because almost at every seminar when we have the youths, we always spend a little time to talk about marriage. So I think it is definitely good to, because we're talking about this, is to discuss this. Because, one day, of course, you're going to be marrying the Lord, and you're going to be totally marrying into the family, right? Another family, a family that you're not familiar with. And you can't just, marry the brother or sister and run off, but you also have to be very much engaged with the affairs of his or her family. So we can already see that the relationship that Jethro has with Moses is something that we can try to emulate and try to pursue after for our future marriages in the Lord. So Jethro comes up to have a kind and caring concern for his son-in-law. And Moses actually revealed something to him that was bothering him. Let's look at verse 15. Let's look at actually verse 13. And so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. 14. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he had did for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit, and all the people stand before you from morning until evening?" So we can see here that Moses was actually taking it upon himself to judge all the issues that was going on for, let's say there was like 1 million people, right? Or maybe it was just like hundreds of thousands of people that he led out of Egypt. And for every single little issue, no matter how big, no matter how small it was, Moses thought that he would take it upon himself to do all the judgment and the delineation of it. But we see here that this was actually really driving Moses kind of crazy, and he was being very, very tired. And it was his father-in-law that noticed this and gave him quick advice. So we can see here if we jump on to verse 19, this is the advice of Jethro. "Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God for the people so that you may bring difficulties to God." 20. "And you shall teach them statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk and the work they must do." 21. "Therefore, moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over to them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. 22. "And let them judge the people at all times, that it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you." So we just said before that Jethro is older than Moses. So this is a person that it's not his own father, right? It's also an elder. So Moses could easily, if he was very proud, he wouldn't listen to Jethro, right? He probably would be like, no, I want to do it my way. And what do you know, right? You are from another different generation. So I think one thing we can see right away is that Moses was humble to listen. So in our servitude, the first thing we can see is that many of us here were team leads, or room captains. We're also just in charge in certain different areas. Sometimes we have to tell others to do something. And if you have like a worldly point of view in doing this, then it's kind of like what it says in 1 Peter chapter 5. Let's go there. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3. "Nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock." So this is very interesting because this is talking about the elders in the church at the time of Peter. And the elders, their job was to be shepherds. Shepherds are also very much like stewards. They have this responsibility to oversee the church and watch the sheep. And then so Peter was saying here that we should not lord ourselves over others. So since most of us, some of us are working, have had internships, or maybe we have people under us, sometimes we get really excited when we find out that, oh, I can be a manager, oh, I can be a team lead. So I have all these little pawns, all these little, henchmen working for me, and I can just direct them while I just sit back and enjoy my lemonade at the beach, right? That's the kind of idea we see sometimes in society. But that is not the way when Moses listens to Jethro, right? Moses, he humbly listens to his father-in-law. So what kind of advice does Jethro give to Moses? We just said that to place different rulers of different numbers of people, to let them deal with the more, the unimportant or trivial matters, but let the larger cases, let Moses deal with that. So I think this is also reflecting back on my testimony I gave about the KFC. I think one of the first lessons I learned was that I wasn't delegating. Right? And there is this concept that we feel that maybe we sometimes think that because we are young, we're invincible, and we have a very good mind, and we're very intelligent, why is it that we can't do things ourselves? Like Brother Micah was sharing with us the other night, that isn't it easier sometimes to just do things yourself? I remember when I was in business school, I had a lot of group work, and in my cohort of 5 or 6 group members, we often have to meet to do like a group project. And I always found that even though it is good to have different opinions, good to have group work, you can divvy up the work, but sometimes you find that it is a lot faster when you work linearly. When you work in parallel, sometimes things can get a little crazy. But I think that back to my example about the Cerritos servitude, I realized actually we are not able to do everything ourselves. And our sufficiency only can come from God. So when we have to come to this time in our life where we become we have the role of a coordinator, or we are a team lead, then we have to really understand that we are just like what Jesus is. He is a servant leader. So let's look at Philippians chapter 2. We also looked at this the other day. Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. And then also verse 6. Who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. 7. But made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. So just because Moses was going to be the leader of all these sub-leaders, Moses would still have to carry on becoming humble and being humble. So this doesn't mean that he has the power and he has the authority to boss over other people, but rather he can learn a lot from these sub-leaders, from his own people. You find sometimes that when you are the lead of a group, you learn a lot from some teammate on your team. Sometimes your team, you may not be the oldest one. You might not be the one with the most experience. Since now I'm in Flushing Church, I pastor Flushing in Boston, and I work with a sister at Flushing Church. She's almost 80 years old. And she is one of the most energetic, most spirited workers in the church that I have ever met. And at this age is still teaching J1. And so when I reflect about all the holy work that she does, it's not like she's trying to list that, oh, I've done all this holy work, and it's like collectible cards. But actually you can see that she is an undying soul in the church. We often go on visitations to visit our members as well as our truth seekers. And you can see that from her spirit that you learn so much from her, and that even though her age is advanced, that the way she does holy work is just like a 20 or 30-year-old. A lot of vitality, a lot of vibrancy. So from this, I learned a lot from her, that even sometimes I know that I'm weak, I can be tired, that I can also get sick. I think that when I reflect on people like her, I can see that, God makes everyone differently, and we have different levels of faith at different times. And even if you are in like a position at church, right, that has to technically direct other people, you actually can learn a lot from your coworkers, right? And the idea is what Jesus was, is that he was a servant leader. He came to serve and not to be served. And so this will also help out when you start delegating, is that this is not because, like I said, it's not because you want to, try to boss around people, but rather this will actually really help you to prevent yourself from spiritual burnout. I think exactly what I was telling you about with my situation, having too many things on your plate. And as you go through your life of servitude, you may have these certain thoughts that, okay, so if I can do it, if I can do certain things, if church asks me to do something, then I will at least pray about it, I will entertain it, I will do it. So maybe you will have 3 to 6 responsibilities at church, right? That's a pretty full plate. And praise God, and may God bless you if you can, rely on him and continue to focus on these 3 to 6 works. But as for me, I realized as I was growing up that it wasn't about quantity, it's about quality. I remember at Irvine Church, there was this time when I was interpreting regularly to English, and I found that there were a few times that things weren't so smooth and in my interpretation. So I asked the interpretation coordinator if I could have a break, and so I can focus more on what I was doing at the time. I was a council member for evangelism. So that also took a lot of time. So it wasn't because I just wanted one less thing to do, but I felt like putting quality into the field that I was working on, I think, served my interest best. So that is also something for you to think about, that this doesn't mean that when people ask us that, I can only do one holy work. But for all of this, you must put it into prayer and have God move your heart to know what you can actually do. Because in the end, our sufficiency, our ability, all comes from God. So we can jump to verse 24 and see that Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. So this was a very wise move, once again, that he listened to the suggestion of this older person. So that is the same thing for us. If we are a team lead, if we are a coordinator, if we have a role where we're leading others, and someone maybe that's on the council, right? They come to you and they say, well, council talked about A and B, and we thought that there's a suggestion that you might probably want to make for your team, right? And sometimes you're like taken aback. You're like, huh? You want to basically tell us that what we're doing is wrong, right? And you sometimes take that as a personal offense, like a slap on the fist, on your face, that, yeah, suddenly your ego is hurt. But in my situation, something like this happened actually several times when I was in TTP. I was living at Hillsborough Church in my second semester, that was in 2020 fall. And the pastor there, that was, he was the resident pastor and also happened to be our counselor. So one day he pulled me and Preacher Chad aside, and he basically told us that we have to clean the Hillsborough house that we were living at. So on the Hillsborough church premises, there is a very, very old house that cannot be demolished because it's kind of like somewhat of like a historical treasure for the town of Hillsborough. And so Preacher Chad and I lived there along with a few other younger brothers. And so in that talk, the preacher told us that this house is very dirty, and and Preacher Chad and I have no idea how it is that people knew that, right? But every Sabbath, actually, when we're all in the chapel, there's probably 1 or 2 council members that go into the Hillsborough house to kind of survey the land. And it was brought to our attention that the house was very unkempt. This was kind of troublesome for me and Preacher Chad because both of us were like, well, the two younger brothers that are there, they're kind of like the caretakers. So technically, that's their responsibility. But the preacher told us that, you guys are the TTP students, right? You guys have to set the example for the younger ones. Then you need to take one for the team. And so when we thought about that, after prayer, it made more and more sense. But now this is the biggest struggle for us, is to be able to tell those two youngsters that live there that they have to bring their A game, right? And in the way we say it, we can't be like, what in the world are you doing that you just leave all the dishes in the sink, but you save it all for Friday to put it into the dishwasher, or something like that. So for Preacher Chad and I, it was definitely a hard situation. Once it came to the day that we had to tell the brothers about this task they had to do, about how we all should do it, this is what we decided to do. We said that to the brothers, we didn't talk down to them, but we decided that we make this into a group effort. That we all just, hey, on Fridays, like around 4 p.m., before Sabbath services, let's take turns, right? I'll do the mopping, you do the sweeping, and then he does something else. So in actuality, it lessened the blow, because we didn't really necessarily have to full on yell at them, but we allowed everyone to feel that they were a part of the pie. So that was a big, kind of one of the wake-up calls I had, was that because the people that tell us what we have to do, sometimes you think it is a man-made situation, that they're making up this thing that they're telling us to do. But then the more that I prayed about it, I realized no one can tell you what to do in church necessarily, without you necessarily feeling in your heart. Because if you take it the wrong way, you will always think that someone is trying to boss you around. But if you take that advice that someone tells you, and you take it from a very positive standpoint, and especially if God moves you in your heart to understand their standpoint, then you won't take it in a proud manner, right? Because that is the first thing, is that, as we said so many times, it's our ego, right? Last time we said we have to cut off our head. We have to skin ourselves. And that is really part of the lesson as being a servant in church. So now I realized that the preacher that said this to us, you must do this, is actually in the standpoint of the church. And if we cannot listen to what the church tells us to do, then we won't be a very humble worker. We'll always carry around with us a chip on our shoulder. And that is something that can ruin our servitude if that is not rectified now. So in our prayers, we can reflect on a couple things, right? That when we're given advice, how can that resonate in our heart? How can that make us truly, truly accept that with a humble heart and not talk back, not grumble and complain? As well as in the future, as we work through all these different teams, may God help us to continue to work together as a team that is conducive, as well as being able to have this idea of being a servant leader, and also learn how to delegate, because God is a God of order. He is not a God of confusion, and He is a God of peace. And so may God help us throughout our servitude. Let's come up and pray and ask God to guide our rest of today, all our work groups. Let's also pray for the UX, the graphic design team, because they're going on an excursion today. And let's pray for their safety, that everyone gets back here safe and is able to finish the work that they have to do. So let's come forth to pray.
So there's no specific announcements, just continue with the keeping up of times. And also, we'll have the design team leave shortly. So yeah, no announcements.